Well, hi everybody. Meteorologist Joe Chaffee. Welcome to tonight's Joe Chaffee weather show on the 5th of August, 2019. Hope everybody had a great weekend as we begin a new weather week ahead. Kind of an interesting week with this persistent northern, we call it the northern jet stream, the jet stream that runs along the Canadian border. We've been watching it occasionally flex back and forth, and sometimes when it flexes, we get a pretty strong short wave to move on through. We've seen that happen on several occasions in the last couple of months, and particularly in the last 4 weeks. And I'm thinking that Wednesday we have a setup for severe weather in the northern mid-Atlantic and on up into parts of the Northeast. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the tropics. If you remember last week, indicating with what we were looking at, how you should not pay attention to the long-range models, and this was yet another example of longer-range models, and even the hurricane models, especially the hurricane models, spinning up Category 3 hurricanes out in the Atlantic. By now, we should be having somebody getting clobbered, and guess what? There's nothing out there that's worth watching. So we're going to look at the tropics and see what's going on. And Nitrovert, who is from the area up in Minnesota, he's on tonight, and he mentions the radars are lighting up like a Christmas tree up there. So I thought we would start with that particular area first, because it is that trough that is going to be creating the severe weather risk for the northern mid-Atlantic and the Northeast on Wednesday. And I know I'm skipping Tuesday. We'll get to that in short order, of course. But as far as tonight is concerned, we do have a working severe thunderstorm watch. This is as of 7:05 p.m. Eastern Time. So bear that in mind if you're watching this on a replay. Please go to weather.gov to get your latest weather information, since everything that is here is obviously going to be dated. So we do have severe thunderstorm watches, and looking close enough, you can see maybe a little dots of orange there. There are quite a few severe thunderstorm warnings that are running up from southeastern Minnesota across Wisconsin and up across northern Lake Michigan. Some special marine warnings there. Some excessive heat issues in the southwest and in parts of Southern California setting up, and it looks like we also have heat advisories up in northeastern Washington. Flash flood watches up for South Florida. They've been dealing with quite a bit of rain over the last week or so with the stall frontal boundary in the east, and we'll address the situation there with the latest radar, and we'll see what WPC has to say with regards to rainfall this week. But here is the Storm Prediction Center's risk area for tonight, with two severe thunderstorm watches working inside an area of enhanced risk in northeastern Iowa, southeastern Minnesota, and on up into Wisconsin. Another slight risk area showing up in western Nebraska and parts of eastern Wyoming and southwestern South Dakota. No severe weather risk up and down the East Coast, but certainly seeing some showers and storms from Chesapeake Bay down through southeastern Virginia, eastern North Carolina, through the Carolinas into southern Georgia. Some storms scattered about, and then some other storms in central and South Florida. So that there's still energy along the East Coast, and we've got a cold front that is coming into the Great Lakes. All of this, obviously, is going to be in play over the next couple of days. And here's our U.S. satellite loop tonight, and then we're going to switch over to take a look at the radar and see what's happening. So, of course, if you notice, you've got this old frontal boundary along the East Coast with moisture streaming out of the Gulf of Mexico, across Florida, particularly over Florida. You can see the buildup of cloud tops there and into the southeastern part of the United States, and then running into the open waters of the Atlantic. We actually have a little bit of a wave developing on this frontal boundary, and that is producing the clouds from Virginia on up into southern New England. There isn't much going on, unless there were a couple of pop-ups in South Jersey this evening, but it's really down excuse me, from the Delmarva Peninsula further south that we're getting some action. Now, there is going to be a wave coming out of this that will pass by to the east overnight and into tomorrow. Once that goes out, then we're going to just transition over into a very warm and humid air mass for later Tuesday, but particularly for Wednesday. And Wednesday's going to be another one of these days where you're going to watch the satellite loop to see how much, if any, cloud cover you have in the morning and going into the afternoon, so we can figure out, are we going to have maybe more daytime heating than what the models indicate? We've seen that happen the last two severe thunderstorm events that we've seen for my area anyway, eastern Pennsylvania to southern New England. And that trough that is causing all that, of course, producing the thunderstorms tonight. And you can see the blow up of clouds going on through the northern plains and the western Great Lakes, and that is moving eastward. Busy on the radar for sure. And here we go. We'll bring up the latest radar. Gotta get the right window. And we're going to start up in Nitrovert's land, up in Minnesota. And you can see it's pretty active here. You've got some very heavy cells. Looks like most of them are southeast of Minneapolis now, into southern Minnesota, right along the Iowa state line. And then there's this kind of this east-west line that running in through west central Wisconsin. Pretty well-defined line of storms there, and another line of storms moving through across Lake Michigan, although that line looks like it's weakened a little bit as it crosses over. The water temperatures up there in that part of Lake Michigan are a little bit on the cool side, so I'm sure that's having some impact on some of these storms. But nonetheless, this is a pretty solid-looking trough and a fairly strong shortwave that is going to be moving eastward. Now, with respect to risk area, I want to let me back this up. This is Wednesday's risk area, but let me just back up to Tuesday so we don't skip a day. So for tomorrow, we're looking at the SPC's marginal risk from Vermont through much of upstate New York and northwestern Pennsylvania, and then through Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, and then it kind of arcs up into an area of slight risk back through parts of Nebraska and through South Dakota. Wouldn't be shocked totally if this gets beefed up a little bit. That has been the way it's worked this season here in the Northeast. So when SPC has put the risk area up in day 3, my usual rule is you pay attention, and they are showing a marginal risk for at least half of Pennsylvania, half of New Jersey, much of New York, particularly the Catskills, on up into northeastern New York and southward to about New York City. We have it also over western Long Island, much of Connecticut, much of Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and Vermont. Now, I'm going to tell you that I think what you're going to see, my guess is that you're probably going to see this marginal risk area expanded a bit, and I think you're probably going to see a slight risk area added to it by the time we get to Wednesday morning. And you also have a marginal risk back from Wisconsin through southern Minnesota, Iowa, and into South Dakota, down through Nebraska, and in through eastern Kansas. Now, as far as tonight is concerned, just taking a look at what's happening here, I've got we're supposed to have it. I had it set it up. I may have to set this up again. Yep. It somehow reset itself. This particular tool that you can access by going to the Mount Holly website is, it's kind of quirky. It loads, and it'll be working for a while, and then every so often you'll kind of lose it. And it appears that at least now the OBS were missing. So you're going to have to trust me when I tell you that we're looking at dew points that right now are sitting in the 50s across much of upstate New York and back over through Massachusetts and Connecticut and Rhode Island. So there's still some semblance of drier air here, but the dew points have started to come up as you go to the south. And of course now we've got these high clouds, and Further south, you're seeing that action in New Jersey that I mentioned earlier, and here's a close-up view of some of the storms that are going on in southeastern Virginia over Chesapeake Bay, and then down into North Carolina, very busy on the radar tonight through the Carolinas. So this wave that is going to attempt to come up. I'm going to just try to put the temperatures on one more time. Let's see if I can get it to happen. And it looks like they're having some issues here. All right. No, I tried. But this wave that's developing off the coast is going to take an area of rain out to the northeast. I think that areas in coastal New Jersey and to about Long Island might get clipped with a shower or two overnight, but not much more than that. There'll be clouds around overnight into tomorrow, extending further inland, at least to start off the day. But I think as we go into the midday and afternoon hours, you're going to see those clouds thin out, and you will start to break out into some sunshine. So this is all going to, of course, lead to the possibility of severe weather. But before we get to that, we have tomorrow, which might produce a few pop-ups in the afternoon. The NAM3 maybe is overdoing it here with some of the development of showers and storms. There's a little bit of a weak front or trough that's moving through here for tomorrow that the NAM3 gets a little bit too aggressive on it, in my view. I think they're going to be more in the form of pop-ups. Actually, here we go. See, I had it a day ahead of time. I'll take it back. It actually is not really doing very much with tomorrow, and this to me makes sense. The only thing I would look for is maybe the possibility of some sea breeze frontal action either in New Jersey or on Long Island, depending on the wind direction. And then Wednesday, the NAM3 gets fairly aggressive with developing showers and storms here by evening time. I would not focus on the specifics of whatever short-range model that has not worked as a forecast tool, a forecast concept these last number of weeks. You've been really far better off if you just figure out where the risk area is and then kind of go from there. So I think that's going to continue to be my approach as far as tomorrow for Wednesday is concerned. And one of the things that I've found to be rather valuable has been this 700 millibar layer. And this is for tomorrow, Wednesday evening. I keep thinking, why am I not figuring out that we have to get through Tuesday in order to get to Wednesday? So I'm going to bring up the paint box here, and I just want to show you why I think this is a good indicator. And I've put up the NAM. This is for Wednesday evening, okay? And you'll have it in front of you in just a moment. There we go. So there's our little paint box, and this is the NAM's view for Wednesday evening. And one of the things that's happened in these severe weather events that we have seen, we look for the presence of some kind of upper trough in this northwest flow. They have been of various strengths. This one's not a half bad trough from that respect, and we actually do have one. I'm just kind of generally drawing the axis of that trough. You know, I'm going to start this map clean again. Hang on. Let's start with the clean map again. Okay, so here's your upper trough. So the presence of the upper trough to me is one of those things you're going to put in the check mark box with regards to severe weather. But the other thing that strikes me, and this has been the case the last several times, is when the NAM model has been pretty good at picking out these areas of strong gusty winds. You'll notice that you get these little blobs here of strong winds. These are strong wind gusts. If you look at the and there's a few more here back that are a little more concentrated in Pennsylvania, and this is for Wednesday evening. But the fact that the NAM is doing this to me suggests that there is going to be some kind of severe weather to deal with. And when we look at the wind speeds indicated in these darker red areas of the model, we're talking about winds of 50 to 60 knots. Now, if you're getting convection that's going to develop here, you're going to wind up seeing some of that wind mixing down. So that creates the possibility of some downdrafts. And in the instance of maybe some isolated cells, I suppose a rotation can't be ruled out. I'm not, forecasting it this far ahead. I want to see what the next sequence of runs, what they do tomorrow and into tomorrow night. But if past is prologue, it's hard to argue. You know my feeling with regards to how weather conditions are never identical, but they do have a tendency to rhyme. And in this instance, I think you're seeing another case of rhyming, where you've got a shortwave trough in that northwest flow that comes on through and triggers off some thunderstorms. So the key, again, is to identify that risk area. I think SPC has, in terms of the geography where they have the marginal risk, seems to make sense to me at the moment. But I would think that there probably will be, where you see some of these strong winds being indicated. This is at 10 o'clock Wednesday evening. This is where I think you might wind up seeing a slight risk, maybe northeastern Pennsylvania to the Catskills and to northern New Jersey, and maybe they'll extend the marginal risk a bit further to the north and slightly more to the east. Now, this trough is going to go through, and I think at this point I'm going to widen out, and we're going to go upstairs to the 500 millibar level to about 18,000 feet. Again, notice the southern extent of the jet stream here. This is for Thursday morning. That last height line that you're looking at is the 588 line that runs from Nebraska through southern Missouri, across Georgia, and then turns out to the east. So you've got this, and look at the wind barbs at this level. So you've got northwest winds in the upper atmosphere running all the way down through southern Georgia and even into northern Florida and extending out into the Atlantic. So even if you were to have a tropical system, by the way, I'm going to throw this out at you, even if you had a tropical system that was headed up into something like this, guess what? It would turn up and out and never come close, because you've got this protective northwest flow that is just locked into the eastern part of the United States. And in this particular instance, the trough, the southern extent of that jet, the trough is strong enough to push the southern extent of that jet pretty far to the south. Now, there's a secondary trough that comes through Thursday night. Thursday evening, there'll be another cold front and maybe a shower or storm with that. But I tend to think that the fleet front may rob much of the energy out of the atmosphere, so that I don't know how much is left for that second trough to work on. I don't want to understate it, because I could think back to that instance back, I believe it was in June, where we had, late June or early July, where we had this secondary trough that came down on a Sunday and produced a really vicious thunderstorm that came down from Connecticut and moved across western Suffolk County on Long Island in the middle of the day and caused a lot of damage. So I don't know if, I'm not predicting that, I'm just saying I don't want to understate it. I want to wait till we get there, because that is a cold pool aloft. But it's all going to be part of the process of us transitioning over into a drier air mass. Now, here we got our dew points on Wednesday. Again, daytime heating is going to be key here. Dew points climbing up into the 70s, so the atmosphere is going to be fairly ripe with tropical moisture. Thursday, your dew points actually come down a bit, so they actually drop down into the upper 50s behind that first push. So I don't know how much you're going to be able to do with this, but the air actually is not that moist. And then once this front passes, and we'll switch to the GFS, of course, I think this is going to be the payoff that most people are waiting for. Look at all that green coming out of the Great Lakes and Plains and spreading into the Northeast. You've got some pretty nice dew points here. Low 50 dew points down into Virginia by Saturday morning, and and actually for Friday too, the dew points coming into the Northeast for Friday, it could take a little longer to get it down into Virginia, North Carolina, but they get there as well. And you've got a really decent push of dry air here that's going to be for the Northeast and Northern Mid-Atlantic states beginning on Friday. Areas further south will start on Saturday. But Friday, Saturday, for me anyway, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and even Monday. Well, Monday the dew points start to come up somewhat into the 60s. But certainly Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, to me, look very, very good. And the overall pattern, as we look at the jet stream, we'll do North America. We haven't done that in a while. Yes, folks, that is snow up there. Okay, you see it over Greenland. It is there. It'll be, we get to get through the month. You do see it every so often, especially the latter part of the month, way up in the northern, the northern latitudes in Alfred, in Alfred's up in Wainwright, Alaska, in that part of the world. But here we go. Look at the troughing here, starting with today. You have this amplifying trough in the east. Part of it lifts out. You get another arm that comes around it. And you're still getting... Now, here's a change, at least on this run after day 10. Suddenly, for whatever reason, it drops this deep... The GFS wants to drop this vortex down in the west, and build a big ridge in the east. Listen, the pattern's been pretty persistent. The model's done this before. I want to go look back at the earlier run. So here's the earlier run. And the earlier run still, it still tries to drop the trough in the west and a ridge in the east after day 10. So let's see if it holds any kind of consistency going forward. How about a quick look at the European, which will only take us out to the 10th day. So you got your deep trough here, and look, I'm gonna wait. I'm gonna hold back any kind of opinion as far as the long range is concerned. I want to see at least a few days of this. You're still dealing with higher than normal heights and pressures up in the northern latitudes, up in the North Atlantic, and heading up into the Arctic region. So that would continue to suggest that the jet would be suppressed further to the south. But again, that's for the long range. So let's run through the short range really fast, because I want to do a little bit of tropical action, which is right now is really an oxymoron. But all right, so here's your wave off the Jersey coast and south of Rhode Island and Cape Cod for tomorrow morning. Here comes your front for Wednesday evening with the front number 1. Front number 2 is back in Wisconsin and in through Iowa, and then you get that to come through here Thursday evening, and then you get your dry push for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday before that high disappears, and then you've got another front that comes down for the early to middle part of next week, and then after that, we'll let the long range figure it out. There's a few questions being thrown up by today's runs regarding what happens after day 10, but right now we're just kind of short range focused. Okay, over to the tropical Atlantic, and I want to just point out a couple of things. The wave that was supposed to develop is in the Eastern Caribbean at the moment. It's in an area that where usually systems don't do very much, especially this time of year. Sometimes as you get into September, you have conditions there getting a bit more favorable. But for now, this wave, and because it stayed pretty weak, you'll notice that it really has tracked fairly far to the south. So we'll watch it as it marches across the Caribbean. But my suspicion is that you've got issues. If you notice cloud tops coming off of Central America blowing to the northeast, that suggests that there's probably some moderate to strong wind shear in the Central Caribbean at least, and maybe even into the Western Caribbean. The waves out in the Atlantic really don't look like very much at the moment, just disorganized clouds and showers. We don't really see a lot of Saharan dust, which might mean that maybe that is finally starting to relax a bit. And the other thing I think that stands out is if you look across the Atlantic from east of the Florida coast, east of that frontal boundary, all the way west to the Canary Islands, there's an east-west high that covers that entire region. That air is very dry. I mean, it's clear that it's clearly that very dry air that is covering that part of the North Atlantic. So it's hard to imagine how you're going to get anything to develop in the tropics while you have a setup like this. So it would seem to me that at least for the next several days, we are going to have rather quiet weather conditions. I want to just fast look up, and I'm doing this for the first time. I want to see if my suspicions hold true. I'm pulling up the wind shear profile in the Caribbean, Gulf of Mexico, and the Southwest Atlantic, and in the Atlantic east of the Leeward and Windward Islands. So this is what we're supposed to have this evening. You actually have a little bit an area of light wind shear where this tropical wave is right now, which might be the reason why you've seen a little bit of an increase in shower and thunderstorm activity. But you do have strong southwest winds not too far away. So as that wave moves along, guess what? It's going to get swallowed up by these strong winds that cover the central Caribbean in the upper atmosphere. We're talking winds of 30, 40 knots or higher at some levels of the atmosphere. Pull up the sounding. I mean, you do have some fairly strong winds of 20 knots or more, at least from the standpoint of the sounding on the spot I picked. I'm going to take it right where the shear zone, where that big blob is. And, you know, you've got some 25 knot plus winds as you go high up into the atmosphere. So, you know, there are issues here with regards to wind shear. And going forward, it looks like at the end of the week that perhaps east of the windwards and the southern leewards out into the tropical Atlantic, you do have a much, perhaps a much better profile of the average wind shear going up from the eastern Caribbean on eastward. Now, whether there's a wave to respond to that, I couldn't tell you. We'll just real fast look out in the tropical Atlantic. I mean, you do actually see some strong winds south of the Cabo Verde Islands in the upper atmosphere at the moment. Just running it backwards here. So there's a lot of wind shear there in the tropical Atlantic. So it's hard to see how you're going to get something to form, at least in the eastern half of the Atlantic. But it does relax somewhat late this week and through next weekend. Actually, the winds across much of the Atlantic south of 20 degrees north look fairly light. So that might be, you know, at least there'll be an upper air look that's a bit more supportive of tropical cyclone development. But you got to have a wave to work with, and that's the other question. Are these waves going to get ripped apart by the shear as they move out, and then you don't have much left to play with as they move westward? That is all part of the mystery. So, in summary, we've got our own issues here with respect to severe weather. The tropics are going to remain pretty quiet, at least through the rest of this work week. And with respect to rainfall, WPC, of course, you know, loaded off the East Coast with where the frontal boundary is. You're seeing some hefty rains being indicated for interior areas of Central and South Florida and along the immediate Gulf Coast. Not so much as you go up in interior of Georgia, South, North Carolina, Virginia. It looks like the 7-day rainfall amounts actually are not really all that high. They pick up again in the Northeast, and I imagine this is due to the weather front that we're going to be dealing with on Wednesday. That's where I think the bulk of this will come. So a lot of that's going to be convectively driven. They're looking at areas of 3/4 of an inch to 1.5 inches, maybe some 2-inch pockets. Still seeing some hefty rains for parts of Missouri and eastern Kansas and southeastern Nebraska into northern Arkansas. Some heavy rains extending down into the southwest. Dry in California, of course, and not too much action up in the Pacific Northwest. A little busy up in the northern plains and a little busy around the Great Lakes. And again, I think that's probably front-end loaded with what's going on at the moment. So that pretty much covers our weather scenario for the week ahead. So we certainly have an idea of where this is going. And nice crowd to see you on board. Johnny Quest is up to 91 inches and counting in the endless rain, sunny and very dry at Mark G's location. Paul Roman and Chuck Cardillo working with a new laptop. Awesome. We're going to get you computer savvy before too long. Are these fronts in response to typhoons recurving? Mike Talley, there hasn't been much action out in the West Pacific. There have been a few systems there, but there hasn't been anything that I've seen. The last time I looked, there was something that was going to be heading toward Japan, but that was being kept on a west-northwest course. I think the fronts are, I think, more being caused by the fact that we've had this very blocky look to the atmosphere with the higher than normal pressures up in the North Atlantic. And in fact, I was looking at the teleconnections, which have us at still has a fairly strong negative NAO, North Atlantic oscillation, so higher than normal pressures in the North Atlantic, but it also has a strongly negative East Pacific oscillation for the next 2+ weeks. And that usually means cooler weather here in the eastern part of the United States. Sometimes the teleconnections don't exactly play out in the summertime the same way they do in the wintertime, but I've noticed that the combination of the two, this NAO negative and EPO negative, let's lay aside the temperature profile for a moment. It has been, I think, responsible for the movement of cold fronts and that jet stream that has been lying along the Canadian border and just basically flexing back and forth. So that's where I think your weather fronts are coming from, rather than being caused by recurving typhoons. I mean, that would strengthen a trough in the east, ridge in the west scenario if that were the case. But there hasn't really been much going on. Alfred Phillips, fall time season temperatures. You're getting closer and closer up there, Alfred, up in Wainwright, Alaska. Before too long, 245 active wildfires. He reports to us. And Chris Alley, nice to see you on board tonight as always. Stephen White, are we done for the heat this summer? Well, look, it's still plenty of time. If we go to a ridge in the east scenario, the way the GFS did today, if we go to that sort of scenario, then we're not done with the heat. But while we still have this northwest flow, I think it's pretty safe to say that we are going to have cold fronts coming through every couple of days. So at the very least, if it does get hot, it can't get too hot or too humid for too long. Wednesday, I believe, will be the one day where you could see temperatures up in the mid-80s to around 90 degrees before that cold front comes through. And again, we're going to watch for the possibility of daytime heating and see how that impacts the development of thunderstorms. All right, folks, let's call this quits for this Monday night. Thanks for being here as always. You can follow this all along on my Patreon platform. For those of you who haven't joined up, one of the things I'm going to be doing in the coming 2 months with hurricane season is doing extra stuff just for Patreon members. That's not going to be on my website, and I'm probably not going to address it very much even on the live stream. So there's going to be just some stuff for Patreon members only, along with other things that Patreon members get that others don't get. And it's just $2 a month, which, if you ask me, I think that's pretty reasonable. So if you're interested, if you're weather geeky, a lot of the folks that are on the live stream are on Patreon as well. So I put the link up there in the chat. For those of you who haven't downloaded my free weather app, there's the link to that as well for all mobile devices. But I would also point out that if you are on Android, an update has been pushed through, so it now will go, when you pull up the local forecast, it will default or should default to your personal location. And you don't have to do it, you don't have to set it up anymore each time you go in there. So it'll do that automatically. So I put the link up for that. And one other is an easy way for those of you who would like to support my YouTube channel and everything else that I'm doing, and this doesn't cost you a cent. If you're shopping on Amazon, use my link, and Amazon will throw me enough to get a couple of fishing lures and maybe a couple of cigars, and it's on them. We're a participant in the Amazon Services LLC program, which is an affiliate advertising program designed to provide a means for us to earn fees by linking to Amazon.com and its affiliated site. So if you shop, you use the search bar. You don't have to buy what's on there, but on the page itself. But if you use the search bar, you get what you need. Amazon throws me back a little bit of coin for out of the courtesy of sending you there, and everybody is happy. All right, have a great rest of your evening. Do stay safe, and we will see you tomorrow.